Part 11. We're doing it. We've done it, in fact, but we're still going to be doing it throughout the duration of this particular top 5 scary video, because ever since we began this series, Forgotten Horror Cinema has been quaking in their boots at the thought of being left behind, falling down the back of the proverbial cupboard to join the other dusty DVDs in their fondant journey toward obscurity. But not anymore. No longer will these gems of horror cinema remain unrecognized, and instead, like a particularly grim-looking scarecrow under a perfect harvest moon, they will be outstanding in their field. Let's take another look, shall we? Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host, Jack Finches. Today we choose to take a look at the top 5 scariest forgotten horror movies, part 11. Whew! Roll the clip.
I'm not running anymore. Come on!
For the curious amongst you, of course, that scene was from 1991's The People Under the Stairs, perhaps one of Wes Craven's most underappreciated of horror films, and yet a movie that still manages to find a way of making us crawl up the walls. For the astute amongst you, then you'll know that particular movie managed to make its way onto part 10 of this series, and as is usually the case, consider this clip your friendly reminder to give it a watch if you haven't. I know a lot of you in the last video enjoyed that mention, so consider it done. Let's begin, shall we? Kicking off at number 5, Cherry Falls 2000. And you know what? I'm actually pretty damn shocked that I haven't covered this movie on Top 5 Scary Videos yet, and so it seems it has so far managed to give even me the slip, but no longer, because Cherry Falls is an awesome movie. Bizarrely enough though, this movie also very nearly didn't make it out of the cutting room floor. And you also know what? I'm super sad, because Brittany Murphy stars as the leading role of this movie, and she was such a phenomenal actor that was taken far too soon. Really, don't say a word, girl interrupted. Brittany Murphy was a force to be reckoned with in cinema, and she had so much more to offer. So if for any reason, watch this movie to see Murphy do what she did best. And also, Cherry Falls is just a straight up awesome movie, despite the fact it very nearly didn't even get released. Written by Ken Selden and directed by Australian filmmaker Jeffrey Wright, Cherry Falls is a slasher movie that surprisingly has some intelligently morbid undertones to it. I remember watching it on a whim after finding it in the DVD graveyard of HMV way back as a wee whippersnapper, and after finishing this movie thinking, damn, this is going to be a cult classic or something. That was great. And yeah, after that, nothing, really, go figure. But whatever, now is the time for Cherry Falls to rise up. It tells the tale of a local teenager and daughter of the town sheriff, Jodie Markin, played by Murphy, who alongside the local high school drama slog find themselves wrapped up in the classic virgins die first kind of slasher fest. However, whilst on the surface this movie seems like a box of cliche frogs, it certainly is not that, and it may actually well be one of the most creative and subversive slasher horror movies of the early 2000s. And there you go. Another reason to give it a watch. Swinging in at number 4, From Beyond the Grave, 1974. In the previous part of this series, we spoke about a particularly awesome horror film from the 70s, Symptoms, starring Angela Pleasance, that just so happened to take the number 1 spot in our series. Whilst her father, Donald Pleasance, is a legend of horror cinema himself, why settle for one Pleasance when you can have 2? As thankfully for us, the 2 of them just so happen to feature in this horror anthology of British cinema. Now, whilst both of them take minor roles in this anthology piece, as do many of the other British horror names throughout this movie, and the whole thing is underpinned by the brilliant Peter Cushing, aka Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars, may I add, who in this regard plays an equally evil proprietor. And yeah, that was a Death Star reference. Well, me trying to make a Death Star reference, but hey, I'm clutching at straws here. You see, the anthology narrative behind this movie is intertwined by an antique shop known as Temptations Limited, who peddle their wares under the banner offers you cannot resist. Quick note, you probably should resist them, because nothing good ever comes from purchasing an ancient cursed item. Trust me. During the course of this movie, 4 items are sold that culminate in 4 differing stories. A mirror, a medal, a snuff box, and an antique door. And that's all you need to know, really, because as so far as anthology horror is concerned, although in some senses they're sometimes difficult to vibe with compared to a fully fledged horror narrative, in this sense, From Beyond the Grave is actually one of the most accessible horror anthologies going. It's intelligently crafted, every scene is paced with some remarkably capable performances, and you can tell that every frame was made with a reverence for the genre of horror. Classic horror. Written by Raymond Christodoulou and Robin Clark and directed by Kevin Connor, From Beyond the Grave should be welcome in any horror fan's repertoire. Give it a watch. Seriously, you'll be surprised. Next up at number 3, Fallen, 1998.
Come here. Come here.
Hey, what can I say? It's about time that we featured some Denzel Washington over here at Top 5 Scary Videos, as well as the late, great, legendary titan of cinema, James Gandolfini, in perhaps one of his most off-the-wall supporting minor roles. And by off-the-wall, I mean possessed by a demon for a few scenes, and then that's about it, really. Go and chill in the green room. You know what? That is what I loved about Gandolfini, though. He wasn't afraid about taking roles that he just liked the look of. Also, he got to sport a dope-ass mustache, so there's that too. Strangely enough, though, on that theme, and for what it's worth, 1998's Fallen certainly doesn't get the credit that it deserves, and I'm not exactly sure why. Hey, I'm not saying that Fallen should be held up as some genre-defining moment in cinema, I'm just saying that it was a surprisingly exceptional movie, and it had an absolutely stacked cast to boot. Maybe I'm just nostalgic, but I miss the time where big budget movies were willing to take risks and make movies about supernatural detective thrillers. If anything, appreciating the nostalgia of a time where cinema still took that risk is worth it alone. Written by Nicholas Kazan and directed by Gregory Hoblit, Fallen tells a tale of a Philadelphia police detective, John Hobbs, played by Washington, who visits a serial killer that he was responsible for capturing, a man named Edgar Reese, played by Edgar Cotias. Just as Reese is about to be executed on death row, though, he grabs Hobbs' hand and speaks to him in ancient Aramaic. As he is executed, he laughs and sings "Time Is On My Side" by the Rolling Stones, and then several days later, a string of murder cases emerge, ones that are eerily similar to Edgar Reese's modus operandi. Initially believing it to be a copycat killer, Fallen quickly takes a turn into the realm of the supernatural, akin to the likes of The Exorcist 3, yet in this regard, it fully fleshes out the whole demonic serial killer possession thing out with a far more frightening scope. We'll say no more, and although this movie requires a bit of a suspension of disbelief to be fully enjoyed as a horror thriller, most importantly, this movie is just really bloody entertaining. Plus the cast is stacked. Denzel, John freaking Goodman, Donald Sutherland, Embeth Davis, Elias Koteas, and the late great James Gandolfini. Yeah, give this one a watch. Coming in at number 2, Just Before Dawn, 1981. Alright, we're heating things up a bit here because the remaining 2 entries of this list are absolutely worth your while. In fact, I would go so far as to say that they're some of the greatest forgotten horror movies that we've ever featured on this series. So yeah, it took some digging, but take note. The first of them is 1981's Just Before Dawn, potentially one of the most overlooked teen slashers in the whole of horror cinema. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that 1981's Just Before Dawn is the best slasher horror that you've never heard of. And yes, whilst there are certain visual themes in this movie that won't be for everyone, and everything from the score to the set design is a little dated, the actual craftsmanship behind this independent production is exactly what slasher horror cinema should be. Really, this film was made with some love and affection, and a real appreciation for just exactly why the vital ingredients of teen slashers have stood the test of time. Written and directed by Jeff Lieberman, the man responsible for 1978's Blue Sunshine, Just Before Dawn tells a tale of a group of 5 college kids, Warren, Constance, Jonathan, Megan, and Daniel, who after inheriting a remote rural property in the mountains, head out for a trip in classic teen slasher fashion. The thing is though, instead of just one serial killer out to get them in the dead of night, there's a whole family of them. Just Before Dawn is Friday the 13th meets Deliverance with a spattering of The Hills Have Eyes. And whilst that may sound like a hodgepodge of epic proportions that is doomed to fail, in actual fact, that's exactly why it's so good. The thing is, this movie can be really difficult to get a hold of, down to the fact that even during its original release, it had already faded into obscurity. If you can manage to get your hands on it, however, you're certainly in for a treat. Surprisingly, for an unknown cast, Just Before Dawn is incredibly well acted, particularly by the backwoods individuals, shall we say. Certainly, give this one a watch. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Long Weekend, 1978. And the final slot on this list is reserved for a movie that is so overlooked, it's almost criminal. You see, I have long championed that awesome and mysterious place known only as Australia, and when it comes to cinema, they have quietly yet consistently pumped out some of the most precious hidden gems known to horror. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but Australian horror cinema seems to strike a fine balance between the fear of the physical, the natural world, and the man-made world. Perhaps better than any other, 1978's Long Weekend exemplifies that theme entirely. And it doesn't just exemplify it, but it takes it and it runs with it, and it just keeps on going. Really, you might watch this film and think that it possibly couldn't take it any further. Spoilers, it does. Oh boy, does it keep going. Directed by Colin Eggleston, an Ozploitation director who has certainly earned his fair share of salt, but the real genius behind this movie is the name attached to the script. Everett de Roche, one of the most legendary scriptwriters ever to have cut his teeth in Australian cinema, despite being an American. The premise of this movie is simple enough. It concerns a couple, Peter, played by John Hargreaves, and Marcia, played by Bryony Behet, who alongside their trusty dog, head to the outback on a weekend camping trip. And that's it really. The thing is though, the couple in question have their own share of inner demons, and outwardly, their marriage is on the rocks. Quickly, the couple demonstrate an incredible lack of respect for Mother Nature, especially the husband, Peter. They pollute the bush, they kill a dugong out in the water, they throw lit cigarettes in a dry bush, and they spray insecticide around their camp. How dare they? And as tensions between the couple escalate to a fever pitch, Nature is certainly not pleased with their disrespectful ways. First, an eagle attacks them, then a possum, and then, wow, then things get really bad. Give this movie a watch, and don't let it be forgotten, please. Well, there we have it, folks. Our list for the top 5 scariest forgotten horror movies, part 11. Look how far we've come, eh? What do you guys think? Do you agree, disagree? Have any more to add to this list? Then let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Before we depart from today's video though, let's first take a quick look at some of your more creative comments from over the past few days. First up, SheRolled27 says, "My life is complete. Jack has finally said the words, hell pig." Well, SheRolled27, brace yourself, because I've just said it again. Hell pig. And again. Well, actually, what's more impressive is that you've been patiently waiting for me to say hell pig. That's so oddly specific. And finally, Anima says, "This is also my favourite series. You turned me onto movies I've never heard of. Thanks." Smiley face. And you're very welcome. It's my favourite series too. And look at us. Part 11. Who would have thought it? Well, there we have it, folks. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for in today's video. Cheers for sticking around all the way until the end. If you're a fan of this video, or just top 5 scary videos in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscribe bell, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host, Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos, and until next time, you take it easy.